Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 45 of the Rock and Roll Experience with Mike Brunn. On this episode, I'm really excited to have with me legendary photographer Mark WEISSGUY Weiss. He talks all about his upcoming book, The Decade That Rocked, and all of his experiences photographing all of the rockers of the 80s, such as Twisted Sister, Ozzy Osbourne, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, and many, many more. Certainly, if you are a fan of the rock scene in the 80s, you're going to love this book, and I strongly recommend you go right now on Amazon and order it. I guarantee you're going to love every single aspect of this, and it's going to take you back into a period of time that will never be duplicated. While you're here, hit that subscribe button below on my YouTube channel. Also, head on over to Facebook and follow my page, The Rock and Roll Experience with Mike Brunn, where each and every day we talk about all the rock and roll music that you love. Now, without further ado, let's get started with my conversation with legendary photographer Mark WEISSGUY Weiss. All right, hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Rock and Roll Experience with Mike Brunn. Today I'm really excited to have a special guest with me. If you were a fan of rock music in the 80s, you saw his photos in countless magazines, tour books, album covers, and now he's got a new book coming out, The Decade That Rocked. Please welcome to the show, Mark WEISSGUY Weiss. How you doing, Mark?
All right, Mike. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, I'm really excited to have you on. So, you know, like I just said, you have a book coming out, and I've been reading online. You've been working on this for 5 years. People that I know that have done books say they're not easy. Why did you want to put together a book? What made you do this?
Well, in the beginning, I want to do a book. Every photographer wants to have a book out. I got a publishing company that was interested, and we were going to just do a very simple book on hair metal in the beginning. And I figured, all right, that's going to be easy. I'll just take all my photos where Guns N' Roses, like my first shoot with them in '86,
Sure.
They had the high hair. Sebastian Bach, when he was Adam X, all these bands, Bon Jovi, Ozzy, whatever their hair phase was, probably mid-'80s, Poison, Theater of Pain, all that. So I thought it'd be an easy book, and we started doing it, and it was kind of easy. And then I looked at it, I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't want this to be my first book, because I never did a book before.
Right.
And I said, I want it to be about, my body of work. And I'll do the hair book later on, because that's easy. I want everyone to get to know me, because it's young demographics, there's older people, everyone. I want everyone to get to know who I am, like how I got to be a rock photographer. So then the publisher agreed and said, okay, we'll do it. So we started doing that, and the writer that we had at the time, it just turned out to be like an encyclopedia, like a history book. And then we wanted to shift gears again, and it wanted to be a little more narrative. So after 2 years on working on this book with this one writer, doing some amazing interviews and great work, it just wasn't the book that I ended up wanting, and not just me, but the publisher. So then it became narrative, and I had to put it in my words. And I'm like, okay, I don't write. They hooked me up with a writer, Richard Beanstalk, who interviewed me, and I wrote. So we kind of like collaborated back and forth. So whenever I write something, one of my little stories, my anecdotes of one of my photo shoots, I would send it to him, and he would untangle my words.
Sure.
But when I got it back, I looked at it, I'm like, you didn't do anything. This is what I wrote. And then I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
It's a good writer. They take what you got, and they untangle the words. That's what I say. They untangle the words. And it became this really good partnership of, me sending him things. So it started when I was a kid, 12 years old when I got my first camera, all the way up to the end of the decade, and just looked at the experiences. And we just treated it like very systematically. It was overwhelming to try to put 10 years or 16 years, including my early years, in like something. So it ended up being a huge manuscript, and then we had to start in the editing process. So it ended up being from 600 pages designed to down to 300, and then they gave me another 100. So it ended up being 400 pages. So it worked out beautifully. I was diligent on everything. I missed a lot of vacations, and went through like I think 3 girlfriends, you know, 2 girlfriends actually,
Right.
and now the one I'm with now is like kept me on track, and it's like it's still with me, you know.
Well, it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can
say. I keep promising vacations when the book's done.
When the book's done.
They're like, come on, and Michelle is the one that like kind of stuck with me. Goes, okay, and then ironically enough, when I was done, you know, we did go on the Monsters of Rock cruise.
Oh, nice.
You know, before actually it was when this crap happened, the pandemic, and
that was what, February, I think, right?
Right. So that's right when things were starting to get a little not even crazy yet, but just like looking at each other, you know. When we got back, you know, when I was going to take on a real vacation, like closer to the release date, you know, so
now you can't, right.
But, you know.
Right, absolutely. Well, you know, it's interesting hearing you talk about like how you went through different iterations of the book, because when I first heard about the book, I just assumed, wrongly so, there'd be a chapter on Guns N' Roses and a chapter on Motley Crue and a chapter on Ozzy. And I was like, well, that'll be cool. It'll be. But when I saw the book and it's chronological, you know, really the entire decade of the 80s, and I felt like I was reliving my teenage years all over again, going through, oh, this is when I was 12, oh, this is when I was 13. And it was, to me, I loved the layout. I loved the narrative, focus on the pictures, obviously. But I'll say, I know you just said you went through different iterations. You got it right, at least in my opinion. I loved the whole flow of it. And I felt like I was just reliving that decade of my teenage years all over again.
Thanks. It's so these interviews that Daniel did, the guy that interviewed most of the in the book, he spent they agreed to do like 15 minutes, you know, to the interview. And Dan was such a good interviewer that he, like some people, he tortured. I think Rob Halford, he tortured for almost 2 hours. You know.
Oh wow, nice.
And he ended up doing the forward out of that, and you know, stuff out of it. But like we had all these material of these artists talking about me, talking about the times, and at the end of the day, it ended up being one quote.
Right.
But I'm using the other stuff to help promote the book, and you know, maybe there'll be some kind of audio-visual version of it. So it's all helpful stuff, but it's like we had this wealth of interviews, over like 100 interviews, and there's just like in the book, if you see by the quotes, or by the pictures, there's a quote by like not every band, but you know, the key players.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love in the book you start off, like you just mentioned before, in your childhood days, right? And how you got your first camera, you were mowing lawns. And I love it. You say like, you know, one of your neighbors offered you a camera and you wanted it because it looked like it was worth $1 million. And I just cracked up when I was reading that. Yeah. Did you think when you were getting that camera that, hey, I want to go into photographing concerts and musicians? Or did you just think, hey, that looks like a cool, expensive item?
Well, at that time, I was just getting into music. My brother was in a garage band. He was playing Steppenwolf and Iron Butterfly across the street. So, you know, I was just getting into it. He was a couple years older than me. And but I never bought an album yet, or you know, I like the Monkees, you know, things like that.
Sure.
You know, so you know, I used to just mow lawns for $5 a cut. I was 12 years old. We were motorcycle kids, so we would like, you know, save up to get gas to ride the motorcycles. And then you know, I had a steady stream of customers, but then you know, I'd always look for more, and I was on my way to mowing someone else's lawn, and this lawn looked really high. So I'm like, all right, there's a target. Knocked on the door, and I said, you know, hi, I'm Mark. I live down the street. You know, would you like your lawn mowed? And he goes, no, I do it myself. And I'm like, well, look it, you know. I was like, kind of gave a funny, you know. And he kind of looked at me like, well, smart ass kid, you know. He goes, I'll tell you what, you know, if you mow my lawn for the season, I'll give you this camera. And he pulled out this camera. He you know, went away. I'm just standing there waiting for him. To, you know. I'm sure he never used it, or maybe he's done with it or whatever. And it was a Bell & Howell Canon camera, and it was this big metal chunk. It was weighed a lot, you know, and that was my first camera. And that's what kind of, it didn't even, at that point, it was just a camera. I didn't even know what I was going to do with it. I thought maybe I would sell it or something, you know, but I had it. And then when it was in 7th grade or 8th grade, and we had a photography darkroom area. And I couldn't get in that class. You know, it was at the end of the school year. It was like May when I got the camera. And I went to the teacher. I said, look, I got this camera, and I want to start taking pictures, and can you help me? And he during that summer, he helped me develop, it was like a summer, it wasn't even a class. He was just helping me,
Right, sure.
And he took me in the dark room, and that's where I got the bug. I went in this, because it was a really nice dark room, red lights, all the chemicals. So he showed me how to develop film. And the first roll of film that I developed was just like my dog and my brother.
Right.
But once I had it in the developer, I did the negatives, and then I put it in the paper, the blank paper, in the developer. It came to life. It was like magic,
Right. Nice.
My age, we all, loved magic at the time.
Of course.
Magic, we chat our little.
I still do.
So that's kind of gave me the bug, and I kind of did that for about a year until I got bored of taking pictures of my family events and my dog and my brother and all that. So then I put the camera away and kind of like forgot about it until 1974, the summer, Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City, New Jersey. Stills Nash and Young were playing.
Okay.
And my brother took me to the concert. I was 14, and we went there, and just 50,000 people, beautiful night. I was there in the midst of 50,000 people. First time I smelled pot. And hanging around. It was like a real community. Right. And then a friend of the family came by. He had these two hot girls with him with a camera around. And he just happened, and all these people just happened to bump into us and, hey, how you doing? And our families would get together like on holidays. Okay. So I knew him, but I didn't know him. So anyway, I said, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to the front to take pictures. And I'm like, and I kind of watched him like, I watched right. anymore, with the two girls, So then I think it was Labor Day or a few months later, one of the holidays in September, I went to their house. Our family went to their house, and I went into his room, and he had the black light on, and it was incense, and his parents and my parents, my parents were really cool. They were partiers.
Part of the 70s, 60s, and 70s, right? That's the way it was.
And they let the kids smoke in his room, and incense, and the black lights, and the posters, and then he had all these photographs hanging that he shot from that show and other shows. Nice. So that's how I said, wow, that's what I want to do.
That's what I want to do, right. So now let me ask you something. Fast forward a couple of years, right? And I know you took some pictures at 77 of Kiss. And like we were just saying, the 70s was, a little bit different than it is now, right? People in New York City, you could buy drugs on the street. There's prostitutes on the street. Somehow you get arrested for selling photos in front of Madison Square Garden. What happened? How did that happen, right? Because you have these great pictures, some of them are in your book. How did that happen that you get arrested selling pictures?
All right. Well, I think it was the Rock and Roll Overture in April '77. I snuck into the concert because what I used to do before that, I went to maybe a dozen concerts, and I used to go to the concert, take pictures, and sell them in front of them with my friends out of my high school locker, on the party train, and Kiss was playing. Actually, that show, I took the photo. Now, the following year, the same year, but later on the Love Gun tour, they played like 3 nights in December.
December of '77. Yep.
That's where I thought I was going to rake it in.
Okay.
So I had the pictures from the earlier show, and I was selling them with my friends, and I got arrested selling them for $1 a piece, and I went into a paddy wagon overnight, and the judge said, if you want them back, you got to appear before the court. And I'm like, just keep them, just don't tell my,
right.
And then I said to myself, what am I going to do now? And then I said, well, you know what? Let me, I picked up the magazine Circus. When I said that, I had the magazine looking at me. I just opened it up, looked at the address. The next day, I just walked. I took a train into the New York City, and just went into the office and just, told them. I said, hey, I told them what happened to the secretary, and she said, why don't you wait a little bit? The art director will be out after, he's on deadline now, but once he's done, maybe you can have a chat with him. Sure. Introduce yourself. So waited a couple hours. He came out, and he took me in his office, showed him my photos, and he said, I like what you're doing, kid, but, do this and do that. He wanted me to use a different film where the flash, where it's more crisp on the face. And he said, come on back when you think you got something.
Okay.
And then fast forward 6 months, Aerosmith and Ted Nugent were playing at Giant Stadium in the summer of '78, and I snuck my camera in, and I got really good pictures of the daylight show. So Kodachrome doesn't need the flash. Right. So I had crisp shots of Aerosmith in daylight. So I dropped them off with the Ted Nugent photos and forgot about it. And then maybe 2 months later, I think it was October '78, Beatles were on the cover. The secretary called me up. He goes, Mark, go to the newsstand and just go to the newsstand. Got a surprise for you. Right. So I rushed to the newsstand. Sure. And I'll forget it. The Beatles were on the cover. I'm looking through it. And then the biggest photo in the magazine was a centerfold. And it was it looked familiar. Wow. I looked at what it was,
Nice.
So that's when the ball started rolling, Then I had Ted Nugent pictures they wanted, and then every issue in Circus after that, they would run my photos. And then it got to a point where, they were getting me photo passes, and I was doing assignments, and then, led to, cover photo shoots, and it just led to, to bigger and better things.
Absolutely. Well, in the 80s, I used to love reading the credits, whether it was my tour books, magazines. So I was always very conscious of your name in all the magazines. And, I look back on that and I look in your book right now, you've got tons of great photos with Ozzy, right? And I love those photos because we think of Ozzy now, and he is the guy that had the TV show now. And so we all know that side. But in the 80s, Ozzy really was the Prince of Darkness, and he was biting heads off bats. And he was somebody everybody was afraid of. And you've got these great pictures of him in drag, an Easter outfit, and an Easter bunny. It's a total opposite of what you would think about Ozzy at that time. How do you get the Prince of Darkness to do things like that?
I know. Well, it started out to be an accident, and I say that because I had an assignment from Circus to do a cover photo shoot with Ozzy in 1981. The first album came out. And, they wanted to be on the cover. They wanted publicity. So the Circus was a great conduit for both of us. So arranged a photo shoot. I brought my equipment to the hotel. And one of the themes they wanted to do, besides just a cool looking rock and roll photo for the cover, was this thing called Circus's high school yearbook. And a lot of it was laid out like a yearbook with, black and white photos, squares with,
I remember it.
Ted Nugent something and, Robin Zander, most romantic, but they would have, it was like a little sarcasm in there. So for Ozzy, he was most athletic. Right. So I went into it trying to come up with an idea to come up with something just for a small little black and white. So I brought boxing gloves. Okay. And so I got there with the boxing gloves, and then I'm waiting for Ozzy. I'm setting up. I figured we'd do a quick shot like that. And then I said, Sharon, where's Ozzy? Because we were waiting. He's getting ready. I go, okay. He's taking a long time. So he comes out in this pink tutu. And I said, okay, game on.
Exactly.
Here's the gloves. And then there were some red boots in the corner. I said, let's put these on. A little play off of, fairies wear boots.
Right, nice.
And then, and I shot it in color. I had to shoot it in color too. And I submitted all the photographs to the magazine I spent the whole day with them. We got them in the bathtub. I got them different things. We went around Central Park. We spent a good 2 days just doing tons of photos because they wanted a lot of press, and we were going to give them a lot of, it wasn't just for one cover, it was for multiple covers. And wanted to get it all in, before they went on tour.
Makes sense.
So then so the magazine came out, and they used that photo on the cover, Ozzy in the pink tutu. And I was like, oh, okay. I was a little nervous, I didn't know what anyone was going to, but as it came down, the Osbourne camp weren't too fond of it because it was only supposed to be a black and white photo. And I'm just I was only 22 at the time. I was kind of new. I mean, I was just starting to shoot, a couple of years in the business. And, when Circus Magazine hires you and they technically own the photos at the time, they paid me like $125 and they own everything.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, I got it back because when they closed shop, Jerry, the editor, said, "Mark, pick up your stuff if you want it. I know it means a lot."
Yeah,
so that's why it's in there. Thank you, Jerry Rothberg.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you how you got that back, so that's good to hear that they did that.
So, so they used the picture, and the Ozzy's camp, management, Sharon, Ozzy, they didn't want anything to do with me for a while.
Okay.
But then we started getting a lot of attention from it. Positive press, I guess. Any press is good press.
Absolutely.
And then it would just be, then we became, when they went on tour, they let me come on tour, and we became friends, and that was beginning of a relationship that, we have today. And, I've been through, everything with them, it's like I've, with all the babies growing up, and I got all shots of that, I photographed Jack's wedding. I did Kelly's album cover, Shut Up, when she was 18, it's like whenever Sharon and Ozzy needed anything,
you were the guy.
I was a guy. And when I needed something from them, they would help me out too. Like when they played Live Aid and Black Sabbath, I reached out to them. When Us Festival, not that I couldn't have done it on my own at that point, but they made it easy and they got me the access. So I'm forever grateful for that.
Absolutely. And then also around, I guess, a couple of years later, you started working with Motley Crue, right? And you became their official photographer as well, right? So how was it working with Motley Crue in the early 80s? And you got some great photos in the book from, like 82, 83 time period, I think it is, right before Shout at the Devil came out. But what were they like working with at that time?
I first met them in 82. I was working for We Magazine, which there's a section in the book that we dedicate. We had to keep it a little R-rated, and some
of course
more risk, and a little more risque. So we kept it kind of clean, but we took pictures of naked women with rock stars, and the one we did was with Ozzy and a couple girls in a church, and with a coffin and all this and that. So that was the first one, and once we had Ozzy, it's like everyone wanted to do it, So then when I went to L.A., Bryn Bridenthal from Elektra Records at the time said, "We have this new band called Motley Crue, and they'd be perfect for you guys," So we met with them, me and Michael Kirk, who was the editor, who was doing the shoots with me at We. And we got together, told them about the concept, we got drunk, got thrown out, and then we ended up shoot a few months later. And, we got the girls, they got the motorcycles, the smoke, all their things. And Nikki, we interviewed Nikki for the book. And, when Nikki gets interviewed, he refers to that shoot as like defining the band. Like that was the band,
they're amazing photos.
It was like, so that's how we first got together. And then from there, they played the Us Festival. I was there with Ozzy, and we said, hi. And then, we hung out. I took some pictures there. And then the tour started with Ozzy, and that's when we became really tight. I was on tour with Ozzy, a couple of weeks at a time, not the whole tour, but just 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. Sure. If a magazine needed something, if they needed something, tour book, poster, they would call me, and Ozzy and, Motley, whoever the opening band was, I think that year it was Rat did a bunch of shows, and also Motley Crue. Right. So, me and Motley were buddies, and, they would say, "Hey, why don't you take a break from Ozzy and come on the bus with us?" So I said, "Of course." They had the girls.
Well, that you don't have to ask you twice, right?
Sharon said, "Yeah, sure, you can go with them.
Right.
Be careful," she said.
Right, absolutely.
So
go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's how we really became tight, and then from there, they asked me to do a lot of other things down in the rest of the decade.
And that's what I was going to say. So I love in the book, and I didn't recall seeing these photos in the 80s, right? But I love in the book you have photos of Ozzy and Vince Neil together having tea time. And I just saw those pictures, and I just cracked up. I said, "This is great." I don't know if I missed them in the 80s or if they're just released in the book.
A lot of photos that I shot, I felt that either they got overlooked or they weren't right at the time. I don't know. That was just kind of out of, Sharon said, I was in L.A. Whenever I come to L.A., and Ozzy's in L.A., I would say, is Ozzy around to do a photo shoot, And she said, "Yeah, but let's do something different." I said, "Okay." And I would just happen to be with Vince that I think I saw him at the Rainbow. We were hanging out, and and then I kind of put two and two together, and I said, Vince, what are you doing, tomorrow, or I'm going to shoot with Ozzy, and we're trying to come up with something, and well, he's like, sure, I'm in. And Sharon told me the idea that she wanted to do, with the tuxes and everything, and she goes, I told her I got Vince. He goes, find out what his dress size, or his shirt and sizes. So I got all the sizes, and Vince came in. He put everything on, and Ozzy came in, and then we just had a bunch of fun.
Right.
It was actually kind of it was stale in the beginning. They were just having tea. It's like,
okay,
this is like, it was kind of boring,
Okay.
And they didn't know what to do. They look at me to pull something out of them.
Right. Give them guidance with this.
And then I said, I got an idea. I said, Ozzy, go under the table and stick your legs out so it looks like and that got him under the table. And we did that photo, and then he just started, crawling around, and then we just had fun,
Absolutely.
And I don't think that ever was published, that one.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't remember seeing them, but as I'm going through the book, I'm like, these are great pictures. I love these pictures. It really captures a certain time, and not what you would expect with the two of them having tea together. But to me, it was really cool.
And the one in the did you mention the one where they were backstage in drag? That one?
No, yeah, right, yeah. So go ahead. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So that one was another Vince Ozzy moment when we were on tour together, and we were looking to do something different with Ozzy again. And me and Michael was working for Faces magazine at a time, and we were on Motley's tour bus, and we were trying to come up with an idea. And then we see Tommy throwing in some lingerie in this big bin. And we said, what's that? He goes, that's the trophy bin. So I said, hey, can we look in there? He goes, yeah. He goes, can we borrow some things? And we pulled some things out. And we dressed Ozzy up before the show, and we got a wig, and we put that on, and then we just had some fun. And that's, the back cover is a shot of Ozzy and Tommy. And actually in the Rainbow, it's been up for like 15, 20 years, like right at the bottom of the depth.
Nice.
So these shoots, I never really plan out shoots unless it's an album cover or something like very specific. But I just love spontaneity, and I just like to see what's around and bring a couple things maybe to spark it up. And then go from there.
So it's a perfect segue. So in your book, you had mentioned that you love doing all these photos for magazines, but one of the things that you noticed was that a month later, the magazine was off the newsstands, and those pictures, theoretically speaking, could be lost. Now, you didn't know a lot of us would end up keeping those magazines for 40 years, but I understood that concept and that thought at the time. So you decide you want to try to get into doing an album cover, and your first one is beyond iconic, right? Twisted Sister, you do the Stay Hungry album cover. So talk a little bit about that photo shoot and how that came about.
Well, I've always wanted to do album covers. I didn't know when I was going to get a lucky break or how it was going to happen, or maybe I was working so much, doing so many things. I really didn't have a portfolio that could get me in the door to one of these record companies, because the record labels, they have their own people that do their album covers, seasoned photographers. A lot of them are fashion photographers, commercial. They don't necessarily use rock and roll photographers a lot, unless you're really established big rock and roll photographer. And I wasn't. I was a kid, So I got a call from the management saying that the band wants you to shoot their album cover. They see your pictures in all the magazines, on the cover of Circus, and they want a rock and roll photographer, And they talked the record company, or the manager talked the record company into using me. Mark the Animal Mendoza gave me a call with the concept. I said, I'm in. And I said, I never did an album cover before. He goes, I don't care. You rock, we like you, I said, okay. He gave me the concept, and, that was a built set in my studio in New York. Put it together. My father was in construction, so he helped me with building his men build the set in the studio. I got the bone the week before, and I did all the little decorations and all that, set building, and lit it, and we kicked ass with the shoot.
Right. Now, and at first you were doing, I think, a lot of band photos during the day, and you have a lot of outtakes in the book, which I loved. And those are the photos that ended up on the back cover, I believe, of the album. So was that the original intention, that those photos would maybe be the front cover? And then I know in the book you mentioned you do one roll of film at the end of the day with D, which ended up being the front. So was that back cover originally intended to be the front?
Well, the original concept was, and this is Mark's idea, and the band agreed on it, because it wasn't supposed to be a single image of D, because at the time he was getting all the attention and it was a band. So they really wanted to keep the band imaged as the band.
Right, sure.
So the idea was to get them around this table, which ended up being the back cover, you know, kind of like hungry, you know, starving, like hiding out, you know, and then they were going to be in all makeup and their persona behind them. And so I shot two different scenarios, the band behind them and the band down below. And I had the light in the middle of it too, and other things. And I didn't really account for, you know, this small room fitting now 10 people. I really only designed the room for 5 people. Right. And it was too crunched up and people were very constricting, and everyone gave me their all, but I couldn't get what I needed out of them in their persona. Like, and D was kind of holding back because he was with the band and he was trying to be a good guy and like not steal the show. So he would look good in the photos, but the other guys would not really pull it off. And not all the time. I mean, you know, there wasn't a magic shot, you know, and a lot of times a couple of the guys were like kidding around, like goofing around. There's always a couple, you know. Sure. It's an insecurity thing when they do that, you know.
Right, of course.
They give me the finger, they giggle after they shut the fuck up, you know.
Right.
So, you know, it's all part of the course, you know. So we literally shot from 9 a.m. to like 5 in the morning, like 22 hours. And then when we did other things, we did, you know, background photos, pose photos, with makeup, without makeup, you know, took a break, lunch, dinner. But like it was like 4 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, and D, they were all leaving. And I said, D, you want to? I asked any of the guys. I said, any of you guys want to do some individuals? And everyone's like, nah, it's all right. We're going home. We had enough. And D's like, I'll do some. And I said, all right, cool. Everyone left, right? We waited till everyone left, and then D just like within minutes, he just went in the corner and just grabbed. You know, I threw the bone at him, you know, or. And he just started making noises and hitting the wall and punching it, growling and everything. And like literally the last, you know, there's 36 photos in a roll of film, and the last shot was that magic photo. I mean, there was good photos also that if we didn't get that, we would have used, but that was the one where he grabbed it. Right. And then basically we sent it, you know, I sent it in all the photos, and it was out of my hands. You know, I didn't know what was going to happen, and it ended up, you know, taking a course after a couple months that the band shots didn't work, and the record label said, but this does. This says stay hungry. This says put this there. And that was the beginning of the end of the band, really.
Unfortunately, right?
It really caused a lot of friction, which I didn't know till later on, you know. But you know, look, he was the face. He was like the Alice Cooper, but you know, it wasn't called D. Snyder. It was still called Twisted Sister.
Absolutely.
So, you know.
Absolutely. So now that leads to other opportunities to do album covers. I know you did the Cinderella album cover, Night Songs. I never realized you had done, I guess, Dawkins Tooth and Nail also, because you had a bunch of outtake photos that looked like from that photo shoot as well. And I was like, oh, that's really cool, because these are all, to me, great, iconic album covers that I love. So,
here's the Cinderella one.
Yep.
And it wasn't Tooth and Nail. It was Under Lock and Key.
Sorry, Under Lock and Key. That's what I meant. I misspoke. Yes, I misspoke. I knew exactly. Yes, you're right. Obviously.
Once the Stay Hungry album came out, it's like, you know, and it sold millions of records and got all this recognition, and you know, then the record companies started calling me themselves. The band said, you know, this. So I think the next one might have been The Last Command by Weiss. And it just seemed like any album cover I did went gold, you know, because then it happened. Even Britney Fox went gold that I did. It wasn't a great cover, but you know, it was the sign of the times, you know.
Sure. Absolutely.
And then Night Songs, Under Lock and Key, and then the big one obviously was Slippery When Wet.
Exactly. And so I learned from reading your book, I did not realize this, that the album was originally going to be called Wanted Dead or Alive. And I was a Bon Jovi fan from like 83, 84, because I grew up in Brooklyn. So I knew Bon Jovi from local radio stations. And you did a whole photo shoot of them doing like a cowboy theme, which ended up getting, I guess, put to the side. I think they used it on a single, if I'm not mistaken. So talk about that whole iteration of going from the cowboy scene to the woman to the iconic cover that ended up happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they came up with, I don't know if it's going to be called Wanted Dead or Alive or just Wanted, but
okay.
It was that theme, and
mm-hmm. Right.
The idea was to have them in beards and in the Billy the Kid like garb.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they all grew beards and they all came to my studio in New York, and I spent about maybe a half hour with each one, kind of just giving me just a very straight look. And we did this 12-inch cover of kind of laid it out to see what it would look like. And then they kind of felt that they needed, they didn't want the beard look, and they didn't think it was a good image for them. And
okay.
so then they said, well, why don't we take the poster that you made because we turn it into a poster and go up to Vancouver where they're recording, find a warehouse or like a getaway like they had, and then put them in front of it like they're hiding out, but now they're clean shaven. So
mm-hmm.
you get pretty boy look, but you got the posters with the themes, still called Wanted.
Okay. So
we did that, and we thought it came out good. Everyone liked it. Went home, and then I got a call back saying, we're changing the name. It was just a management band call, and they call it Slippery When Wet, and there's mm-hmm. this behind that. Right. And inspired by the sign and the strip club in Vancouver. So when they came back from recording, we did a shoot in front of John's apartment that he rented by the beach in New Jersey mm-hmm. with all the girlfriends and their cars, motorcycles, and we had car wash stuff, and we all had the shirts Slippery When Wet cut up, and we just did a photo shoot. We didn't know if it was the cover or mm-hmm. what it would be, but we just wanted to see how it was. And then one of the girls that we ended up getting from the beach across the street, from the beach, that during the photo shoot was Angela, and she had the big boobs. Mm-hmm. And we put her right in the middle. I didn't do any close-ups of her, but she stood out, Mm-hmm. And so after we got the photos back, we were like, let's, do a photo shoot with just her, not where you can see her face, just very tight.
Right.
And that was it. That was the cover, Mm-hmm. And I have that right here. Let's see. So this ended up being the cover.
Yep.
This is actually, they turned it into a single sleeve. So You Give Love a Bad Name. So they used it quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But this cover, they printed like 500,000 copies, and like I think a couple 100,000 went to Japan where they sold the record there. Right. But the ones in America,
that's how I got mine.
Right. Mm-hmm. So the ones in America, because of the PMRC and the Walmarts and all the stores that mm-hmm. Weren't going to stock sexist things, said, if you put that out, we're not going to sell it. And the record company and the band, they didn't want any. They knew they had a great album. They didn't want anything right. to hold it back. So that's when we came up with the next idea. There's actually a couple other ideas, like mm-hmm. there was the soap and the hands. I don't know.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we did that after the girl, because we figured, all right, it's not a girl, it's a hand with a bar of soap. So we spent like $2,000 on a bar of soap and $1,000 to the hand model. And I looked at John and Richie and all them. I was like, okay, I'll do it,
mm-hmm.
And I did that, and it looked like crap, Mm-hmm. It's like they mocked it out and all that, but it was like, all right, we got to come up with something. And then John just, I think we had like a day left to come up with something, or we mess up the release date. Mm-hmm. So he said, come up. I'm coming up. I'm going to bring you like a black garbage bag, and just, said, okay. I didn't know what he was going to do.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Walking through the door by himself, put the garbage bag on the wall, tack it up, throw some spray on it, and then he just wrote Slippery When Wet, and then he left. I said, wait, don't you want to see the Polaroid? He goes, just send. No, just take it. It's theirs.
Right.
And then the rest is history, really.
And right. So what I love about the book, with all of those different photo shoots is you have, like, I think the Wanted photo shoot ended up being used on like a cassette single that I had. I remember seeing like something like that. But you have all these different outtakes from that photo shoot, like the little like square pictures of each of the band members, which I'd never seen before. And even the girl that you just showed on the front cover, like you said, you didn't do any full body things, but you have one that's uncropped, I'll say, that you can see a little bit more. And I find that kind of stuff like really, because to me, even the girl cover is iconic. I had that in 1987 or 1988 from Japan. And to see the full photo, I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's really cool. So that's one of the things I loved about the book is even seeing photos that I'm very familiar with and saying, oh, but wait, there's a little more to that photo that I've never seen before. I thought that was a really neat thing in the book.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is because like you referred before, like you didn't know what to expect. Like it was going to be Guns N' Roses chapter because that was the plan, Right. But then it's like, it's going to be weird putting Guns N' Roses, and it really wouldn't have made sense. Like, because like I want to do a full book on Guns N' Roses. I want to do a full book on Motley Crue, a full book on Bon Jovi, a full book on all these bands, Ozzy. But I want this one to come out first, and then I want to do the same thing with the bands. Like, do like just the band and just make it like perfect,
Right.
And I want it to be. I feel I was always into systematic things, and it's the easiest way to do something, So I just wanted to show how that decade evolved, and it really shows the visual change of that decade.
I agree 100%. Well, the excess that became mid-late 80s as opposed to 81, 82, that's what I loved about the layout there. One of the parts of the book I loved reading about also, you have a section with Aerosmith photos. I think it's from 1985, if I remember right. And the great concert photos. And then you write in the book that there was a little bit of a disagreement, I guess, with their management, and you didn't take any photos with them for 10 years. What happened? Because they were one of the bigger bands in the 80s there. What happened?
Well, that was the band that first of all, Toys in the Attic was one of my favorite records, I was in high school. And then when I got them in Circus Magazine, it meant a lot to me. And I became their photographer, like Lieber Krebs. I started working at Lieber Krebs' office, who managed like everybody, AC/DC, Ted Nugent. And I became friendly with them because of my involvement in circus, and they got to know me, and then they started hiring me. And so I worked with them all these years. And then when they changed management, their manager, Tim Collins, just wanted they wanted to try to get rid of everyone before them, anyone that, because they were into drugs and everything. And I was accused of like bringing drugs on the tour with me and giving it to them. And, I was the one,
basically.
I was the one getting it from them, I was so they were trying to, cut any kind of ties. That was his philosophy, and, okay, I get it. But I wasn't going to take no for an answer, so I was the squeaky wheel. And, I could see them cutting off other people easily. But me, as a successful photographer at the time, I had access even when they couldn't give it to me because there was opening bands, there was other things. And I didn't have like the personal relationship at that time where I could just call Steven up. So, I would have to wait to see him at a show or bump into him. So when I finally bumped into them, because they were opening for the Scorpions, they were kind of trying to come up with a little bit of a comeback. They were on their downfall, but they reunited after Perry came back. And I shot the '84 tour, for them. But then when they switched, I kept writing letters trying to get a photo pass, and they wouldn't give it to me, and they didn't give me a straight answer. They just kind of ignored it and whatever. So I said, all right, next opportunity I get, I'm going to confront the band, and actually they opened up for the Scorpions at an outdoor gig, and I asked Steven in front of the manager, for a photo pass. I said, I made a request for a photo pass earlier in the week. Am I good for shooting? And he looked at me and he looked at Steven and he's like, oh yeah, okay. Like he didn't want to say no. And I was like, all right, cool. And then I said, can I have a photo pass? And he's like, you don't need one. Don't worry about it. Just you'll be okay. and I go and shoot, and like 30 seconds into it, I get pulled out by the security people saying that, you know, don't ever show your face in here. You're barred, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that was it. And then it's like I couldn't find Steven or nothing or anything like that. So that actually happened. And then there's a lot of stuff that happened after that. So every time, like, DACA would open up for Aerosmith or Skid Row, and, you know, the word was that, look, if you talk to any of the guys in the band, you're out of here. You're not going to spend New Year's with Skid Row, because it was like one of the shows was at Skid Row.
Right, yep.
You're going to ruin your night. So don't even try to, like, talk yourself into another whatever. So I played by the rules. I was okay. Until one show, I was like, you know what, screw this, you know. And I went into the backstage and I talked to Tom Hamilton, told him what happened, you know. And he's like, Mark, I know about it. He goes, you know, he actually said, like, you got to choose between Mark Weiss or me. If you want me to manage you, then you're not going to, I don't want him around. And Tom was like, you know, sorry, Mark, you know, like, you know, because they were to do good, and they were they were off the drugs and everything, you know. So fast forward 10 years, he gets fired, you know, for, you know, whatever reasons. It's in one of their books, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yep.
And then next time they came around, I reached out to their new manager, and I said, can you just please, you know, let the guys know that, you know, I like to shoot them again.
Work with them, right.
And then I did, and we became close, and, you know, we're very close now. I mean, Steven hires me on his solo things, and, you know, invite me to shows, you know, I do interviews with him for my other little things, you know, rock scene. Joe did a great interview for me. So, you know, I have Steven's phone number, you know, you know, if I need something, he'll help me out. And it's where I wanted it to be. You know, I couldn't ask for a better, happier ending, you know?
Well, good. I'm glad that worked out good, because to me, as I'm reading that part, I'm like, this kind of seems silly, you know, but, you know, I'm glad at least at the end it worked out the way it should have.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I haven't read the book full through. Like, I've had it in my possession for 2 months, and I know I should have read it right away, but I wanted to give it a break, but I really need to read it. I don't even know how I, you know, where it led to, like in what you read, but hopefully it makes sense.
No, it did make sense to me. When I say it sounded silly on their management part. Like I was like, this seems like a really silly reason to keep this guy from photographing the band. Like, but right. Sometimes that happens, I guess. You know, one of the things I'm a huge Kiss fan. You can see probably behind me, I got some Kiss stuff hanging on the walls, right? And again, you know, in the 80s, I had all the tour books, and inside I'd always see your name as in part of the credits. And I know in like the Crazy Nights tour book, there's all different like individual photos. And in the book, you have some of those photos. You have like a Kiss unmasking photo. What was it like working with Kiss in the 80s? Obviously, they weren't at the peak the way they were in the 70s. They weren't wearing the makeup. What were they like working with in the 80s?
They were just like one of the, like all the other bands, you know, like they were just like whoever I was shooting at the time, you know, like trying to make it again, you know, where, you know, for them it was like a fresh start, and they were kind of following the same guidelines as like a Bon Jovi or, you know, any of those bands that ended up becoming big, you know. So they were just, you know, they would do you know, photo shoots with the big photographers that would get them in the magazines, me being one. They would do videos by the people that were doing the other, you know, it was like a formula at the time.
Sure.
And they always had the confidence, you know, and they had the songs, but, you know, they crafted themselves into an arena band again. It's just perfect, you know. I don't think they would take back anything that they ever did. Right.
Yep. No, I agree. So to me, and I mentioned before those Ozzy photos and the Ozzy and Vince Neil photos, but I think some of the other photos that stuck out in the book to me, where you had some really early photos of Guns N' Roses in '86, and there's like one really like glam, I'll say really glam photo of Axl Rose in there, and then likewise with Skid Row, there was some early photos in Skid Row being very glammy. I was like, I've never seen that look of theirs before, you know. So
it's the first time, you know. And
okay,
well, it's funny. I shot Madam X on the West Coast, and that's with Sebastian in the band, where his hair was really pumped up, you know, to the top. And a week later, I shot Axl and Guns N' Roses with like the same background and, you know, pretty much the same hair, you know.
Right.
And that was that shoot with the Guns N' Roses was just a quick shoot that I did for Hit Parader. They were the up and coming band. They weren't. Appetite wasn't even out yet, but we wanted to be the first people to have photos of it. So Bryn Bridenthal, who I worked with Elektra, is now at Geffen, and I called her up. I said, you know, she coordinated the shoot. The band didn't really want to shoot with anyone but their photographer, but she said, look, you need to start working with other photographers. I think you'll like Mark, and so that's how that relationship started. And then what else were we saying?
The Skid Row. There's a picture of Skid Row that's like really glam. I'd never seen that before. Well,
when Skid Row were ready to do photographs, we did a photo shoot, and I didn't know what to expect. It wasn't an album cover shoot. It was just they had a look, and you know, John was involved a bit, and Doc McGee, and they wanted me to do a shoot. They hired me to do a shoot, so I did the shoot, and they came up like these pretty boy, like New York Dolls meet. You know, they were glam. I mean, you know, and they looked at the shoot, and they were like, "This is not what you're gonna like." You know, I don't. Doc or John or all of them, you know, and so that shoot, I didn't even know I had the shoot until I went in the garage and said, oh yeah, you know. So that was never in a magazine, that was never on the internet or anything. So that's like, you know, the guys, if I don't remember doing it, they probably will, but you know, I don't know. But yeah, that was the first shoot, and then obviously that's when times were changing. You know, that's when Guns N' Roses, you know, got rid of their, you know, they were wearing, you know, denim and jeans and leather, and same with Motley. So
same with Motley, exactly. Yep.
They didn't know which way to go, but you know, after they saw that, they were like, you don't want to go Poison, you know, or glam, you know. Even Poison got a little bit down and dirty, you know.
Agreed, but I never knew it. Skid Row had that look for even a brief period of time. So to me, that was really eye-opening in the book. It was, again, one of my favorite parts of the book. And now you had a hand in bringing Sebastian Bach and Skid Row and the members of Skid Row together, and actually having Sebastian in the band, right?
Yeah. That was just very, you know, I shot him in Madam X, and that was kind of my only. I just met him once, and it's not like I called him every 5 minutes. We weren't buddies right away, you know. You know, I just shot him in a band, and then I was getting married. Like I think it was like 4 or 5 months later after the shoot, and I told my secretary, I said, you know, why don't you invite the band Madam X? They were nice, you know. Let's get them over here, make it a little more colorful, you know, because there was Twisted Guys were there, Kevin Dubrow was there. I said, you know what, they'll be fun. So, so they were I think they were in Detroit at the time, and they didn't have any money or anything, but they scrapped up the money. I think that even Sebastian was on their way out with the band, and they decided, and I think, I don't know if, I think he had a fight to go with the band to come to the wedding, but Sebastian, I think, and Sebastian like made sure he was going to be at my wedding, you know.
Okay, nice.
You know, so they got in the car together, and they ended up at the Molly Pitcher, and you know, they came a couple days early. We all partied and hung out. They got to know him, and then at the wedding, they were, I think, towards the end, Sebastian, Kevin Dubrow, and Zach Wilde, who I helped him into Ozzy as well. He was in the Ozzy, didn't record yet, but he was at the wedding, and they all got up and jammed. They did Bang Your Head and some Zeppelin. Nice. I went up in the background, even though I can't, you know. And those photos are in the book for the first time. So anyway, John Bon Jovi's parents were there. My best man Dave Feld, Face, was there, who knew the Skids because he knew Sabo, because Sabo used to come to my photo shoots when I did John. I never really knew the Skid Row guys. You know, I seen them. They would just always be on the side. But my friend Dave Feld, who was helped me with my bags and used to hang out, got to be friendly with him while I was shooting John. He would hang out with Snake. So he had the connection. So between John's parents putting in a good word and Face really being instrumental on telling Snake, you know, you got to check this guy out, you know, and getting the tape, did all the back and forth with the tapes and putting them in touch with each other. So with all that, you know, they flew him out. We hung out at the club in Mingles. They did a little show. He got in a fight with a security guard on the way out. And then, the rest is history.
So, to me in the book, I love that there's live photos. There's, I'll say, just like photo shoot type photos that you knew were never going to be an album cover or anything like that. And then, of course, there's stuff that you did for album covers. As a photographer, did you have a preference? Did you like to do one over the other during the 80s? Or were you just happy to be taking photos no matter what?
Well, the easiest thing to do is go on the road and just take photos, because you're just there. They're running the show. Even though it's long hours and you have to wait, it's easy. It's fun. You like hanging around. There's the girls. There's the backstage. There's the booze, the drugs, whatever. So it's fun to be there. And it's for me, I just walk around and I'm like a kid in a candy store. Photo, there's one there, and I taking photos of fans. So I'd walk around the fans, meet people, and then go in the photo pit. I'm in the photo pit. Usually they don't let people shoot the whole show. Let me. There's a handful they do, but when I was there, I was the only one in the photo pit, and most of the time. And so it feels special and good. Sometimes I go on stage, you play the drummer, so it's fun. It was a fun experience. Now in backstage too. Now when I do studio, it's a little bit of work. You got to like put the lights up. You have assistants and everything, but it's a lot of pressure, responsibility to make sure you get what they want to get, and a lot of work. So I enjoy the result on that as opposed to the effort.
Right, that makes sense. No, and to me, one of the things I loved in the book also is you have sections on like the US Festival in '83. You mentioned before about Live Aid, the Moscow Music Peace Festival, right? So there's all these, like, to me, when I think of the 80s, these are like landmark concerts, right? And you have different artists from those days. And like you said before, some backstage stuff, some concert stuff, some shots of fans. It really helps capture that moment, and it helped me, I'll say, like, remember those moments and relive those moments through your book a little bit. So those are some of my favorite parts of the book.
Well, every year, and I'll show you, every year, there's so many books and so many photos in the book. I had to like edit shoes. It's like throwing their babies off a boat.
Right, absolutely.
Who do you throw off? So in each chapter, I started with whoever didn't make the cut. So in 1980, so I start each chapter with a spread like this.
Yep.
You say so. It's 1982.
Yep.
And each one here is a photo of me. And then there's a fan photo, and that's what keeps it consistent, Sure. And then there's a lot of other photos, album covers. The small, like, I don't put the album covers featured, but I'll put the real album cover in the beginning of the chapter.
Yep.
So it's pretty much, and I wish I could have done 2 pages of those, because there's so many bands that I didn't even include, like, that I really wanted to, but I really had to like make it about the stories and about the history. But it was, like, I wish every artist that, I could do a double-page spread on. And originally I did, but then I had to cut it down. I mean, it's...
Of course. The book's almost 400 pages, right?
It's supposed to be 298,
Right.
So it was like the editing and the people at Insight were very instrumental. And, I had to really fight tooth and nail on a lot of stuff. And, sometimes I'm like, no, this has to be in.
Right.
And they're like, well, we can't because of this. And I would really put my foot down and get mad. And I would be like, I think they're going to like pull the plug and like, working on this book for 5 years,
Right. Sure.
But at the end, we had a really good relationship. And when they felt strongly about something, they wouldn't let up either. And I would have to bow down gracefully, because at the end of the day, it made sense. And then I looked at it and I'm like, oh, they were right. So it's like I have a hard head, but, having these creative people involved really helped me learn. I learned so much from this. So now it's like the next books that I do is going to be like a breeze.
Right. And to me, that's exciting to hear, that, because that was going to be one of the things I asked you about, is you had to have taken tens of thousands of pictures during the 80s. And I don't know how many made this book. There's probably, do you know how many photos are in the book?
700.
700. All right. So there's 700 photos. So you must have a treasure trove of other great photos. Because to me, page after page, I'm like, oh, this is good. No, this one, I probably said 3 or 4 times to you during this chat that, oh, that was one of my favorite things, right? Because every section I'd go to, I was like, oh, no, that's cool. Oh, no, that's cool. Because again, it helped me relive those teenage years. So I'm excited to hear that you're potentially going to work on other books, and I'll look forward to those. So fingers crossed that you get that done.
Well, because of what happened now, like what I wanted to do is, like, on June 2nd, which is coming up in a few weeks when it's released, I had a museum booked in my area, Monmouth Museum, and we're going to have this 2,000 or 3,000 square foot place turning into like an interactive, my darkroom setup, my tour jackets, my gold records, make it a real like museum. And I was, it was going to be there for the summer. It was going to have a release party, so that was going to happen. And now, and I was going to take that and have a photo studio set up with the smoke and everything, have people interactive. It's like a learning thing, and it was on Brookdale University, so it's going to tie something in there, and then possibly take that on the road, like try to make arrangements with other organizations, and have a traveling show. But that was one thing I was going to do. The other thing I was going to do, and I was just in talks with some of the promoters that were involved in a lot of these big tours, and travel the country in like a Winnebago, wrap it with my photographs, maybe some sponsorships, some camera people, and then go to a tour. So like, if Lita Ford or Ted Nugent or the Stadium Tour or Ozzy or whoever was touring, and everyone was touring this summer, Sammy
Absolutely.
Hagar. Yeah. Anyone that was involved in my book, I would like maybe go the day before, do signing, do some charitable event, go on classic radio to hype up the radio, the tour that's happening the next day.
Right.
Extra ticket sales, help sell my book, do a book signing, so it would all tie in, and then go maybe follow that tour around for a week, and then hook up with, logistically look at who else is around.
Right.
Just keep traveling and selling books and meeting people and taking photos too, at the same time. So that was my plan. So now the way I see it is like everything's like a year later. Like that's how I think. Like I hope.
Agreed. Yep.
So I think I think the stadium tour is now going to be, even though they haven't made an announcement yet, I don't think, is going to be next summer, and all the tours are going to be next summer. It's like a year off. Right. So what I like to do is I'm going to show this book to a lot of potential people that, my big ones like, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Ozzy, Bon Jovi, all the ones that could be potential full books, and then approach them and say, look what I did, let's get, because I want involvement, I want endorsement, I'm not going to put out a book of Ozzy without Ozzy wanting me to do it. And I've been talking to Ozzy's people, Ozzy and Sharon for the last probably 5 or 6 years, because I thought that would be the easy way out instead of doing this book. Let me just do an
Okay. Right.
They were like, no, we're not ready, and whenever I approached Bon Jovi, like even 10 years ago, they were like, no, don't put it out yet. And I said, all right, I won't, it's at some point, I'm getting older, and, I'm going to have to, but I love to get their involvement, have captions, working together, and put a book that, both the artist and the photographer would have out,
Right, absolutely. Is there anybody during the 80s that you wish you had an opportunity to photograph and you never did? Because I'm going through the book and I'm like, all right, let me try to think of all. And at one point I was like, I don't see a Kicks photo in here. He didn't take, and then I was like, God damn, there's a picture of Steve Whiteman. He did. So is there anybody that you didn't take any photos with?
Well, the only band that I really would have liked to take photos with that I took in the 90s was Pantera.
Right.
I would have loved to shot them when they had the hair.
Right.
So I don't think so. I mean, I think I covered them all, really.
That's what it seemed like to me. Like I said, I looked. I was like, let me try to think if there's any bands, and I couldn't find one. I thought I did, and then I saw the Steve White in the picture, so I was like, nope.
I love Kicks. Yeah, Kicks are. Yeah. I mean, they're awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do people find this book now? Right? They go to Amazon and pre-order it.
Yeah, they can Amazon pre-order. Now, if you can't order it on Amazon because you're in a country where it's not accessible, then you can go to Insight Editions, and they'll ship for like really cheap. The book. I think with Amazon they ship free or something. So, but if you can't get it, Amazon's the way to go for sure. Pre-order. Yeah.
And if you pre-order, did I see? Are you ordering? You offering like an 11 by 14 photo with pre-orders? Did I see that right?
Yeah. Well, if you get the Amazon receipt and you send it to decadethatrock.com, that's my email address for the company. You show the receipt, and you pay for shipping and handling. We give you the free photo of the Guns N' Roses shot, an 8.5 by 11, and I sign it. Nice. And I put Guns N' Roses, the date, and I sign it. I usually sell them for $200-300. Sure. But anyone that gets it, so they get for shipping and handling is they'll get a free shot. And I'll be offering other things too. I have centerfolds that I made. I did a Lita one and a Vince one because I always loved the centerfold because it was my first photo. So I made centerfold the size of the book. I wanted to have it in the book, but we have gatefolds. You saw the gatefolds in the book. So we have gatefolds that we have 3 of those. But so I have centerfolds, and they won't be folded when they're shipped. They'll be like little mini whatevers, but we're not selling them. It's going to be just for promo, So shipping and handling. I'm going to have T-shirts, The Decade That Rocked. I'm trying to come up with a clothing line with artists that I'm negotiating now to have likenesses of them with my Decade That Rocked brand. So it's my brand.
Right, absolutely. No, look, I'm very excited for it. I think all the rock fans, whether you grew up in the 80s, whether you became a fan of the scene after the fact, this book really encompasses what it felt like from 1980 to 1990. I can't imagine any rock fan looking at this and not being thrilled beyond belief. I'm going to look at it multiple times, I'm sure. And it's a great, great, great piece of work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anything else that I didn't ask you about with the book that I'm forgetting about and not thinking of that you wanted to bring up?
No, I'm just, as mentioned, The Decade That Rocked, I'm just really pushing. I just started, I have my Instagram. That I'm just starting my social for the first time for myself. I've had other people run it, but now I'm really getting in touch with the fans and, trying to reach out to anyone who asks me questions. I get back to them. Posting a lot of things. I have a site called thedecadethatrock.com, and there's interviews with all these different artists talking about me, the times, the 80s, magazines, that whole era. And then I also have a place on there called Fanatic, and I have pictures of fans because I love taking pictures of fans. And then I have fan mail from the 80s that I have a big stack of that I'm going to post. I actually posted one piece of fan mail. You saw it by Eddie Trunk's after.
Yep, absolutely.
So I have lots of that, so I'm starting to post them. And I want to connect with these people from 30 years ago. So I'm going to start, like, if you're this person, I'll give you this, just reach out. So I'm trying to keep it interactive. And aside from the Mark Weiss brand, I really want to create a brand, which The Decade That Rocked. So I have Instagram and Facebook called The Decade That Rocked. TheDecadeThatRocked.com, and Instagram just at The Decade That Rocked. And it's pretty much... It's the decade, 1980 to 1990. There'll be album covers that aren't mine. It's mostly my photography, but it's just, I might post ticket stubs, just different things. And just to create this, I feel that I'll get more, like I'm just a photographer with a name, Mark Weiss. I want to appeal to all different genres and eras and, people that are a little interested. So I feel like the name, The Decade That Rocked, has, I don't know, more interest than just Mark Weiss, But I'm doing both, I mean, I know people that are in their 50s and 60s know who I am, like yourself, because they grew up with it. But I want to really appeal to the new generation, and because of the dirt and those, the biopic and other things that are out there, times now for the young people to kind of latch on and to, create rock and roll music that was like the 80s. I mean, I couldn't get a better gift than if I would have contributed to any kind of advancement of that decade and that era of music, because there'll never be another 80s. It's like, because I feel like when I go to concerts, and even like yourself, it's like you feel like you're in high school still.
Absolutely.
You got your stuff behind you. I mean, I'm sure bands from the 90s and the 60s, they don't have like what you have. They don't have the posters and the memorabilia, and they just have the spirit, the rock and roll spirit. And there's bands like the Struts that are kind of, you know, feeling it a bit, and their fans are feeling the same thing. So there's definitely bands out there that are carrying the torch, and it just got to break through. And it's like, it's so hard now without MTV and, like, you know, mass. You got to do it on your own. You got to build it yourself, and, you know, and it can be done, but it's never going to be like a community like it was before, because MTV really was the radio station of America.
It really was, yes.
It brought everyone together. When a tour, when someone was on tour, you went to that town. There was a record store signing. Everyone knew about it. People were wearing the T-shirts. You were in high school. It's now there's so many bands. Like I can imagine going to high school now. It's like there's probably, like, if you would put like 20 people in the room, they'd probably have 20 different favorite bands. Where back in the 80s, it would be like 1 or 2, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, that's one of the things I noticed on your website. You sell photos as well, if anybody wanted to buy those. And I saw you had some photos in there, like early Madonna photos, and even some, I think there was a Gwen Stefani photo in there as well. And I love, no doubt, I love Gwen Stefani, but I'm not collecting tour books and memorabilia of No Doubt. As much as I love the band, it's just there's something about the 80s, like you said, that just draws you in. And to me, like, if you look around the room here, and I know people can't see it, I got Guns N' Roses, Kiss, Quiet Riot, you name it. So it's all 80s stuff, right? And my kids are like, Dad, you got to grow up. It's not 1988 anymore. But to me, like you said, unless you were there, it was such a magical time. And that, to me, is what this book does. It really, truly brings you back into that magic time. So I'm excited for the fans to see it. I'm excited for it to come out. I wish you nothing but the best with the book.
Thanks.
You know, one more question I have to ask you, and it's not book related, because I've always wondered this for 30 years. Like I said, I always would read the credits. Mark WEISSGUY Weiss. Where'd the Wise Guy come from? Did somebody give you that name? I'm just curious.
Yeah, actually they did. I was on tour with Motley Crue on one of those bus adventures, and it was a crazy night. It started by, it was the first time I was on. They invited me on the bus, and, you know, Nikki says, "Yeah, come on, Mark." He's palling me up, like being extra friendly. I'm like, okay, you know. Tommy Lee is by the steering wheel, you know, kind of like he's the driver, but, you know, we're just parked. And I walk up. He's like, he just looks over to me, you know, and all of a sudden Tommy puts his leg out and stops me from going any further. I'm like, okay. And then Nikki starts biting me.
Oh boy.
Like, what's going on? And he's like, draw blood. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, draw blood. So he'd bite me, and he wanted me to bite him back, you know, and to draw blood. So this would be going on. To me, it seemed like an hour. It probably went on for 10 minutes, you know. And then eventually I drew blood, you know. I bit Nick back, you know. And then like, bus, you know. And in the midst of this, I'm drinking Jack Daniels, so that's when I got my flavor for Jack, you know. I started drinking Jack. I go back. Mick was there, you know, watching TV. Vince is in the back, kind of shaking his head, like, "Oh my God, you survived." But later that evening, you know, I'm getting jacked on Jack. Mick are watching the Three Stooges, and all of a sudden, the famous, you know, "Hey, Weiss Guy." So from that, so when I got off the road, I developed the photos, put them in the magazine. And we put the you know, in quotes, White Guy. And then it stuck. Everyone started calling me it, and it stuck.
I've wondered about that for years, and to me, that's a perfect ending. That story just screams 80s to me, right? That whole thing, just everything you just said, that could only happen in the 80s, right? You would not hear those kind of stories today. So
I do want to say one other thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
This just happened today, actually. I was involved in a movie called Gone for the Weekend. It's a movie about five guys from the 80s who never grew up, and one guy, it's like a romantic comedy, and they asked me to do a cameo, to play myself. So I did. It was at a diner scene with my girlfriend, and the main character, Jesse, you know, took my order. He's like, "Are you Mark Weiss? You know, aren't you the guy that got Sebastian and Skid Row?" And the movie's on Amazon Prime. It's been for about a year. It's a funny movie. It's a romantic comedy. But from that movie, this just happened a couple of days ago. I said, why don't we write some kind of like episodic thing on just my character and how you guys stalk me, and have just like do some flashbacks of us as because the guy Jesse and Creeper play kids that were they're like 12 years younger. So like when I was 25, they were like 16, 17. Right. So we're going to do flashback scenes, and so we're just developing that, and we're just putting out, maybe by the time that this thing airs, I'll give you a link. It's a 10-minute clip from the movie of just that part, and it's just a 10-minute and a quick little teaser, and we're going to probably shoot when all this virus comes to a little bit, where everyone can work together, and we're going to kind of finish it up and try to get a like a Netflix thing or whoever watched it. So it's going to be called the Weiss Guy.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I was going to ask you the name, so that's very cool. Well, I look forward to June 2nd. I look forward to everybody getting your book. I have to say, anybody watching this, I give it 100% my full endorsement. You're going to love, love, love it. I can't wait for volume 2, 3, 4, 5, your Guns N' Roses book, so on and so forth. To me, your photos are incredible and really take me back to a time in the 80s that will never be duplicated, like you said before.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks to all you listeners out there. And, keep rocking.
That's it. Keep rocking. Thank you, everybody. Until next time, thanks a lot, Mark, for joining me.
See you.
Alrighty, there you have it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Mark, Wise Guy Weiss. I'd like to take a moment and thank Mark for spending over an hour with me chatting about his book. Again, I strongly recommend everybody watching this head on over to Amazon and making the purchase right away. You guys are absolutely going to love this book, and it's going to take you back to a great, great time where rock and roll was unlike any other era before or after. While you're here, hit that subscribe button below on my YouTube channel. Also, head on over to Facebook and follow my page, The Rock and Roll Experience with Mike Brunn, where each and every day we talk about all the rock and roll music that you love. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Till next time, thanks.